In this scenario, I'm going to show you how we can configure different IGPs, okay, on the DMVPN phase 3 and also some detail related to the DMVPN phase 3 and interaction with the IGPs. Let me to start with the RIP. Also, let me to emphasize that here I have configured the DMVPN phase 3 between the router 1 as the NHS and also router 2 and router 3 as NHCs, okay, previously. Because of that, let me to show you first the DMVPN tunnels. Here in the router 1, show DMVPN can show us that we have DMVPN tunnel with the, for example, router 2 10242 and router 3 10343, and here you can see we have this tunnel. In the router 1, let me to use ping 192.168.123.2. okay, as you can see we have connectivity, and then ping 192.168.123.3, that's it. And also show IP NHRP can show us that we have learned about the 192.168.123.2/32 with the NBMA address of 10242 and also 192.168.123.3 with the NBMA address of 10343. Everything is okay. Then in the router 2 also show IP NHRP can show us that we have one static entry, okay, from the router 1 to the router 1. Here the NBM address is 10141 and also the tunnel address is the 192.168.123.1. we have configured it. Look at here, show run interface tunnel 0. This is the static entry I have configured before. IP NHRP NHS 192.168.123.1. NBMA 10141 multicast. You know that in the router 2, let me to review some of the commands. Here in the router 2, I have configured this command. If look at here, we should configure IP NHRP NHS 192.168.123.1, then IP NHRP map, then 192.168.123.1. For example, the NBMA address 10141. After that, here we are configuring IP NHRP map multicast 10141. okay, you can configure these 3 commands, or if you want you can configure only 1 command. Let me to write here. We have 2 options for configuring these 3 options. First, using 3 commands. Second, using only 1 command. Let me to show you here. Under the interface tunnel, we can configure IP NHRP, then NHS 192.168.123.1, then NBMA 10141, finally multicast. Because of that, it is easier to use only this command instead of these 3 commands. Because of that, also in the router 3, it's better to configuring IP NHRP NHS 192.168.123.1. NBMA is the 10141 and also multicast. It is better. All right. Because of that, in the router 2 also we don't have any problem. Let me to show you the router 3's status. In the router 3, we can use the show IP NHRP again. Again, we have only one static entry. This is the configuration of the router 3, show run interface tunnel 0. As you can see here, we have these commands: IP NHRP NHS 192.168.123.1, NBMA is 10141 multicast. That's it. Also, we have IP NHRP shortcut. Also, in the router 2, let me to show you the routing table. The routing table of the router 2 is show IP route. Here you can see that we have only pass to 192.168.123.0 in the overlay. Actually, we don't have any pass to quad 3 or quad 1, and it is obvious because we didn't configure any IGP. Let me to configure different IGPs. After that, we can talk about the detail of them. First, I'm going to start with the RIP. For the RIP in the NHS, means in the DMVPN hub, we are using these commands. Look at here, you have learned about it previously. Router config. Okay, here we should use router rip. Or let me to write here router rip. Okay, and after that we should configure the version for the RIP router RIP. Then first version 2, for example. After that, let me to configure no auto summary, and then here we are configuring network 1.0.0.0 and also network 192.168.123.0. That's it. This is the configuration of RIP in the hub router. In the spoke routers, Okay, we are configuring this command. Router RIP version 2, no auto summary, network at 2.0.0.0, then 192.168.192.168.123.0. Also in the next spoke router we should configure spoke 2 means router 2 and spoke 3 means router 3. Okay, here we should use only the network 3.0.0.0. Also, you know that in the RIP we should disable the split horizon. I will show you. First, let me to configure it in the router 1. Conf router RIP. Okay, router RIP. Then we should configure version 2, no auto summary. After that, we should configure network, for example, 1.0.0.0, and then network 192.168.123.0. That's it. Let me to go to the router 2. In the router 2, conf router RIP, then version 2, and then no auto summary. After that, network 10.0.0.0, and then network 192.168.123.0. Let me to configure the router 3 also. Conf router RIP version 2, no auto summary, and then network 3.0.0.0 and network 192.168.123.0. This is the configuration of RIP. In the router 1, look at here, show IP route. Okay, show IP route RIP can show us. Until now we didn't learn any update from the RIP. Okay, look at here, this is the configuration of R1, show run interface tunnel 0. Here we have the command IPNHRP map multicast dynamic. It is important to configure this command. After that, we have look at here, interface tunnel 0 IP address. Here we need to configure also the IPNHRP redirect. I have configured it previously. Here we don't have any problem. Show IP route RIP can show us we have learned quad 2/32 and quad 3/32. Quad 2/32 was learned from router 2 and quad 3/32 was learned from the router 3. Here we don't have any problem, but in the router 2, let me to show you, show IP route RIP. It can show us we have learned only 1.1.1.0. Okay, here we have a problem. Let me to show you in the R1, a show run interface loopback 0. Okay, let me to configure it as /32. Okay, but if you want, you can use a /24. Here we don't have any problem, but let me to configure it with the /32 IP route quad 1 quad 255. Okay, after that, now let me to continue. As you can see in the router 2, we have only the network of router 1. This is because of the split horizon rules. When the router 3 advertise with RIP quad 3/32 to the router 1 doesn't advertise it to the router 2, because when we are receiving one update over tunnel 0, we should advertise it again to the, for example, same interface. Let me to disable the split horizon rule. Also in the router 3, we have the same problem, show IP route RIP. Here we have only quad 1/32. Let me to disable the split horizon rule. In the router 1, under the interface tunnel 0, we are configuring no IP split horizon, and this is so easy. In the router 2, look at here, now we have quad 1/32 and quad 3/32. As you can see, the next stop is the IP address of the router 3. Actually, in the RIP, unlike the EIGRP, the next stop doesn't change to the advertiser router. Because of that, here we don't have any problem. Also in the router 3, show IP, for example, route EIGRP can show us, show IP route RIP can show us that we have learned quad 1 and quad 2. Let me to show you what is happening. First, a trace route to quad 3, okay, with the source of loopback 0. This is the first trace route, router 1, router 3, and the second trace route directly router 3, and you know about the detail. Now let me to configure the next protocol, EIGRP. First, we should remove the RIP in the router 1, router 2, router 3, no router, for example, RIP in the router 1, and after that in the router 2, no router RIP, and also in the router 3, conf no router RIP. Also in the router 1, look at here, do show run interface tunnel 0. Here we have the no IP split horizon command. Let me to disable it, interface tunnel 0. Okay, we can configure split IP split horizon. That's it. Okay, now we don't have any problem, only we don't have routing protocol. Let me to configure EIGRP. You can configure EIGRP with both method. First, let me to configure EIGRP with the named method, okay, the newer method.